Hello, welcome to the lecture on John Milton's poem, When I Consider How My Light is Spent. This is the fourth lecture in the course 23 GEC 11 Introduction to Literature. In Unit 2, the poem John Milton's When I Consider How My Light is Spent is found. So, the poem When I Consider How My Light is Spent is a sonnet written by John Milton, and in this lecture I describe the meaning of the poem and move on to the themes brought out by John Milton in the poem. When I Consider How My Light is Spent is a poem by John Milton, which is a sonnet. The form of sonnet which is followed by John Milton is an English sonnet. It has not been divided into octave and sestet. The sonnet describes John Milton's idea about John Milton's conversation as a poet with God. He imagines the presence of God and he talks and he conveys his idea as a poet to the Maker. The first 4 lines in the poem, it is about how the poet considers his relationship with God. The light that God has given is the day, the writing that God has blessed him with. So when he thinks about how he has utilized it, how he has utilized the light as a poet, he is thankful to God. He is considering how he has utilized the talent that God has given to him, the talent of writing which lies hidden in him, the talent of writing which he has utilized throughout his life, and he is thankful about it. And when he is talking about the day in which he will meet God, he considers whether he is more bent towards serving the God or writing. He is considering whether his soul is bent towards serving the God in all its fullness, or writing and spreading his writing and spreading his poems to the mankind. He finds that he is more bent towards serving the Maker rather than writing poetry. So moving on to the next 4 lines, he says, meeting the Maker as a soul may happen at any time in future. So when God returns, so as it is a Miltonic poem. He borrows from the biblical anecdote of the return of the Messiah. When the Lord returns, the poet as a soul, when he meets the Lord, he is under the vision of the Lord. And when the Lord scrutinizes, he wants it to be made clearly that he has utilized the talent that God has given him, the talent of writing which God has given him. So he wanted not to lay or not to hide his talent beneath him. So when the Lord comes, he wants to present before. When the Lord comes, he wants to present before the Lord that he has utilized the light in the talent of writing. So that's the second stanza, that is line number 5 to 8. Now moving on to the next 4 lines in the poem, where the poet is talking about how, as a soul, when he writes, he addresses or he talks to his fellow human being. He questions, he raises the question whether God expects man to do day labor, whether God exacts man to do labor in the denial of light. The question sounds too very strict. He raises this question in a fond tone. He justifies saying that he raises this question in a very fond tone. His fear of the God, when the God returns, that he may chide him for not using his talent, he changes this fear into a question and asks whether God expects day labor in the denial of light. And following the question, he gives a response to himself, asking. He quells his soul, he makes his soul stay quiet and comforts himself, saying that God does not need man's work, God does not need man's gifts. He makes his soul wait patiently. He does not need man's work or man's gift. So with that response and with that declaration, he murmurs and he replies. He murmurs to himself and assures himself that God does not need man's work or his own gifts. So what does God expect? With that, he raises that rhetorical question in the next 4 lines in the poem. So who serves God and what God expects? He answers and completes the poem with a couplet. He's asking how to serve God best. Who is serving God best? So with the line, to bear God's mild yoke. So the best way to serve God is to bear God's mild yoke. So the best way to serve Him is not in exacting oneself or not in expecting only the chide of God, but the best way to serve God is to bear His mild yoke and wait patiently. He describes God's kingdom, Milton describes God's kingdom as stately, as kingly. His state is kingly, and He's seated as a king in His throne. So Milton visualizes God as a power who is seated on His throne. There are thousands who come to His service with the speed of His bid. When God bids, there are thousands who would come to His service, not only in heaven but also in the earth, over the land and ocean, without any rest. When God bids, one who listens to the voice of the God does not stay for a rest. They only serve when they listen to the God's voice. They get to serve by standing and waiting. They who stand and wait upon the Lord get to serve. So Milton says that his love for God, his fear for the Lord, his fear for God will get fruition when he serves God best, using his talent. The following are some of the themes in the poem when I consider how my light is spent. So the poet identifies, or he talks about God-man relationship. He explains where lies God's work, where lies man's work, and where lies man's work before God? And he says how to serve God. He explains about, or he talks about, he prescribes about how to serve God. He concludes the poem by saying that God does not expect man or his gift. He expects only man to stand and wait. Now the next poem in the lecture is Ode to Nightingale, written by John Keats. John Keats, his poem Ode to Nightingale is a lengthy narrative poem, a descriptive poem which describes the flight of the bird nightingale. Which describes the flight of the bird nightingale, and he compares the song of the nightingale to his pleasant experience. How he enjoys the song synesthetically and what the song leads him into. He compares the song of the nightingale to the happiness in life and the pleasure derived from poetic imagination and tasting wine. John Keats enjoys the song of the nightingale. He listens to it when it sings in a full-throated ease. The song of the bird is dull opiate to the poet. The song of the bird is like a dull opiate. When he listens to it, he loses himself merrily into it. He compares the bird to the dryad. Okay? He compares the bird nightingale to dryad, which is a tree nymph. The song of the bird makes him reminded of the drought of vintage. He makes him sing the drought of vintage, which is sung by the nightingale, makes him sing a Provençal song. The song which is in which he got inspired from the song which is sung in the provinces of the winemaking nations, of the winemaking regions of France. So when he listens to it, he is inspired to sing a Provençal song. Then he blesses the bird to fade away into the forest, dim. When he compares the flight of the bird with the plight of the human world, he says that the bird's life is happier. He blesses the bird to fade away into the forest dim. He blesses the bird and he admires that the bird's world is more blessed than the weary world of human. The bird's world, when it is compared with the human one, the bird does not know what weariness is. Then the poet describes the flight of the nightingale. So when the bird flies, it wants to, when the bird flies, it makes the poet want to fly together with it. Nightingale flies not charioted by Bacchus. Nightingale flies not charioted by the god of wine, Bacchus. When it flies, in the time of the night, the queen moon is seated on her throne. The poet imagines the flight of the bird in the air in the backdrop of queen moon. When the bird flies and the poet in his poetic vision flies along with the bird, he cannot see what flowers are on the ground below. He cannot see what flowers or what is there, what blossoms are there on the ground. The bird's song is immortal. As he listens, He is not sure whether he sees it, whether what he sees is in his sleep or in his wake. He is not sure whether he is seeing it, he is in his sleep, or whether he is awake and flying in his dream. Now, the following are some of the themes in the poem Ode to Nightingale. The first theme, the prominent theme in the poem is bird song. The song of the nightingale is described by the poet using comparisons like the song of the dryad, which is a tree nymph, and the song of the nightingale is also compared to the sweet music which the poet equates with the Provençal song. Another theme in the poem is the poet's imaginative flight with the bird. The poet's imaginative vision from the sky when he says that he flies together with the bird. And from top, when he looks at, he sees the queen moon on the throne, and when he sees down, there is nothing, he cannot see what is there on the ground. The third theme in the poem is the mythological references. The mythological references used, some of the mythological references used by the poet are the reference to Bacchus, the god of wine, Dryad, which is a tree nymph, and Lethe, who is a god of forgetfulness. So, these are some of the themes in the poem Ode to Nightingale. Thank you.